Hey, y'all. Guess what we're bringing back? Murder TV Tuesday. Alright, but it's not called that anymore, which does make me a little sad because I loved it. I call Murder TV all the time, but whatever. But now we're doing Tumblers and True Crime Tuesday. Or True Crime and Tumblers Tuesday? No, definitely True Crime. Definitely Tumblers and True Crime Tuesday. Tumblers and True Crime Tuesday. Yeah, that. Anyway, so now every Tuesday I'm going to upload a video of one of the cups being made with the true crime story. I hope you guys find this entertaining as it does combine some of our favorite loves, like glitter and murder, cups and murder, mostly glitter. I don't reckon I make too many cups that don't have just a little bit of glitter in them. Anywho, today's triple T, which is what I'm going to call it, will be short and sweet as I've spent a little bit of time doing this explanation. So let's get into it. We're talking about Paul Warner Powell. This was an interesting case. So in 1999, Paul Powell, he was a 20-year-old self-proclaimed white supremacist. So already we know he sucks as a human, but it gets worse. He spent the last 2.5 years pining after a girl who is just now 16. So since this child has been 13 and a half, he's just been wanting her, which is gross. But I digress. The girl's name is Stacy Reed, and she happens to have a boyfriend right now, who also happens to be black. This makes Powell super mad, and so he decides he's going to tell her to break up with him. Because I guess he decides he has that type of power. And then when you factor in the fact that he's a white supremacist, you say, oh yeah, of course he thinks he does. So, on January 29th in 1999, Stacy finishes up all her exams at school. So she's like done for the day. She gets to come home early. But when she gets there, she finds Powell waiting there for her. Now, it's not really weird that Powell is at her home because they're actually like friends. They spend time at each other's houses. I don't know if she knew that he called himself a white supremacist or if she knew and she didn't care because she liked who she liked. Anyway, he attempts to argue with her about who she's dating, but Stacy calls her mom and tells her mom he's there, and her mom tells her to tell him to get out. And so he actually does leave. He knows that Stacy's stepdad will be home soon for lunch. So, of course, he leaves. But he also knows that her stepdad will be going back to work. So he does return a little bit later. And when he returns, he comes with 2 knives, a box cutter, and a 9mm pistol. Just to talk. The talk results in him stabbing and killing Stacy. After he's murdered this child, he then walks around the house, grabs some sweet tea, and smokes a cigarette. I don't know if he made his own sweet tea or if it's just there, but I question it. Anyway, by this time, Christy, Stacy's 14-year-old little sister, comes home. She sees Powell in her house, which isn't odd, but she doesn't see her sister, so she asks where her sister is. Powell tells her that her sister is in her own room, so Stacy's in Stacy's room. But Christy walks past Stacy's room and doesn't see her in there. She continues to her room, and that's where she finds Stacy dead on her floor. She immediately drops her books and begins to cry because you're 14, what else do you do in this situation? Powell tells her to go into the basement, and she does what he says. She said she did it because she knew, like, he's known to have a weapon on him at all times, and she didn't want to die. So she goes into the basement. He tells her to take off her clothes, which she does. Of course, she's scared. He then rapes her. At some point, he ties her up and rapes her. At some point, some friend comes to the door. He gets fully dressed and goes and answers the door and talks to a friend. She tries to get out and hide, but she doesn't get out of her ropes in time, and she hears him coming back, so she lays back down in the position that he left her so that he can't tell that she's done anything. He then chokes her with a shoestring until she passes out, stabs her a few times in the stomach, and then slits her wrists and throat. He then goes to drink more tea, this is the reason why it bothers me, because is he making this tea? Is it in the house? Why? I have gotten off topic. Anyway, he makes some more tea. He looks for things to steal, and then he leaves because he knows he needs to get gone before her stepdad comes home from work. At some point, Christy regains consciousness, and she's still tied up, but no one's there. At the point when her stepdad comes home, she hears him, and she's able to scream out to him. So he hears her. He comes home. He's already home. He hears her. He goes downstairs and he finds her tied up. She tells him as much as she can what happened, and he then goes upstairs and finds Stacy. He calls the police. Everybody they come in, they check, they take Christy. She's flown to Fairfax Hospital, where she's treated for her various injuries. They, of course, note that Stacy is already deceased. It was determined that Christy's injuries were literally 1 centimeter from major arteries in her neck and abdomen. So Christy is alive, thank goodness. And by the end of the day, Powell was in jail for murder, attempted murder, and SA. It was pretty simple. Of course, she told her stepdad who it was before she went to the hospital. So they were on the lookout immediately, and he was found at a friend's house. After an autopsy for Stacy, it showed that there was a serious fight. Powell's knives tested positive for Stacy's blood, and the rape kit done on Christy showed Powell's DNA. So it's pretty much a slam dunk for prosecutors. But let's quickly talk about interrogations. Powell, during the interrogation, tells the police that he and Stacy got into a fight and she accidentally got stuck. That's a direct quote. He basically downplays what happened, which is why during the autopsy they noted that no, much more than a little fight happened here. He does not admit to deliberately stabbing her. Basically, he made it appear as if it all was an accident. He, however, could not claim that what he had done to Christy was an accident, so he does have to admit to that, eventually stating that he also knew she was a virgin before he raped her, which is awful. So now comes the wait for the trial. While in jail, Powell writes loads of letters to his friends telling them all kinds of details about the crimes. He admits that he killed Stacy, and he raped and attempted to kill her sister because Stacy was in a relationship with a black man, or boy, because they're 16. He also tells them that he'd been planning on killing the entire family and stealing their truck, which is just weird. He tried to have Christy intimidated into not testifying. He wrote a letter to one of his female friends and asked her to have a male friend visit Christy and say mean, horrible things to her. As if that would help, they did have his DNA from her test and his words and his interrogation, but that's neither here nor there. He also told some inmates random things from the crime, such as he got mad at Stacy because she wouldn't have sex with him and that he'd stabbed her twice. He also told this inmate that he tried to cut Christy's throat, but his knife was too dull, so he attempted to stamp on her throat to kill her. He told another inmate that he killed Stacy as a human sacrifice, quote unquote, and he also expressed extreme satisfaction in having raped a virgin, which is just gag worthy. As previously mentioned, he was an awful human being. But also, as previously mentioned, it gets worse. So, in 2000, as we can all imagine, the trial ended with him being convicted of capital murder and of Stacy, in the capital murder of Stacy and the abduction and rape and attempted murder of Christy. He was also convicted of grand larceny. I'm not sure where that fits in. I didn't do the research on it. He was sentenced to death. He was sentenced to the death penalty for Stacy, and 3 life sentences for what he did to Christy. He cried he was a mess. I don't know why he didn't expect that to be the outcome, but whatever. Prior to this, he was a smug a-hole about like the whole thing. He showed absolutely no remorse. But in 2001, somehow he got the Supreme Court to reverse his capital murder conviction on the grounds of some stuff that's filled with lots of legal words, but basically says something like because he didn't get convicted of a robbery, he didn't kill Stacy in the commission of one, and because he didn't rape her, or more specifically, there was no evidence of him trying to or succeeding in raping her, the crime couldn't be elevated to a capital offense. He raped Christy, but that didn't mean that he attempted to rape Stacy first. It's a whole bunch of words and wildness. It's something along those lines. And if I'm wrong, whoever understands legalese better than I do, please feel free to correct me. I do not like being wrong. Anyway, so now he gets to get a new trial for the murder of Stacy. While awaiting trial, Powell decides he'd write a few more letters. So he writes a letter to Stacy's mom, sending a picture of some girl who is naked from the waist up and happened to look like Stacy, and asked her mom if she could help him figure out who this person looked like. He knew that it would be someone they both knew. He just couldn't put his finger on it, but he knew she could help. He also writes a letter to the prosecution's attorney because, as you can all guess by now, he's not too bright and he doesn't understand double jeopardy, but he thinks he does. The letter begins with him stating that now that he can't be tried for capital murder anymore, he figures he should tell them the rest of what happened on January 29th, just so they can see how stupid they are. I'm going to assume y'all see where this is going, but we're going to continue. He admitted that he planned to kill the whole family, which definitely makes his crime premeditated, but whatever, he goes on. He admits that he tried to have consensual sex with Stacy, but she rejected him, and then he threw her on the bed and told her they could do it the easy way or the hard way. Stacy decided to fight, but he got the best of her, so she gave up. As he was forcing her to take off her clothes, the phone rang. She tried to answer it, but he wouldn't let her. Another fight ensued, and he ended up stabbing her. He also says he stomped on her throat until she stopped breathing. This is all new evidence, which is why, if he'd understood double jeopardy, he definitely would not have written this letter. But whatever. So the prosecution decides to drop their new case, which is to try him for first-degree murder, because that's all they can do now, and enter a new indictment for capital murder. Again. So to recap, with months included. In June, the Supreme Court overturned his capital murder conviction. In October, he wrote an obscenity-laced letter to the prosecuting attorney, a letter that's sole purpose was to give additional information on the crime. And in December, he was reconvicted of capital murder. He fought this charge for years, but in 2003, Powell was tried and convicted of capital murder during the commission of, or attempted commission of, the rape of Stacy, and again was sentenced to death. Powell appealed to his conviction various times. He even tried to fight with the double jeopardy clause, but to no avail. Powell was executed on March 18th, 2010 by electric chair. He didn't have any final words, but he had spoken to the Reed family the day before and apologized for the crime, saying that it was pointless and it was senseless and pointless, which I'm sure was a hard apology to accept for them, especially coming from someone who showed no remorse for the crime until he himself was about to die. Lorraine, Stacy, and Christy's mom said he did seem remorseful in his own way, however. Anyway, in the time since Stacy's senseless murder, her mother started the Stacy Foundation, which stands for Strive to Achieve Compassion, Intervention, and Education. It's a foundation that promotes hope and healing to survivors of violent crimes. She's also written a book detailing her journey back to hope. Okay, you guys. That concludes week 1 of Tumblers and True Crime Tuesday. I'll see you guys next week. I hope this was not too convoluted since I did not reread my script before I read it. And if it was, I hope you guys still understand. Let me know if you like this or not. I'm going to let you guys watch the end of this cup being made. I think it's so cute. I love you guys. See you next week.